Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Blake, and this is Matt.
What's going on?
And today, we want to tell you about the significance of a Major League Baseball ruling that came down as of this recording just a few days ago. And
that was a great pun you threw in there. Great pun.
I'll throw us straight to an MLB.com article. Commissioner Rob Manfred bestowed Major League status upon 7 professional Negro leagues that operated between 1920 and 1948. If you have listened to us before, you'll know that just a couple episodes ago, we released an episode on Josh Gibson, who is long and widely considered to be one of the greatest power hitters in baseball history. Not just Negro League, but baseball history. And part of that episode, we talked about him and his story and stuff, but also some of the repercussions for the way that the Negro League is viewed by society today and how it was viewed previously. And it just so happens that Rob Manfred, avid listener of the podcast, changed his mind since we published that and is now adopting 7 professional Negro leagues that operated between 1920 and 1948, which includes about 3,400 players during that time frame. Wow. Right?
That is pretty impressive, and it's a pretty big deal. Clearly, all of our fans took our complaints straight to the commissioner's office.
Winning.
Yeah, this is huge. There are going to be 7 leagues, like you said, that will be acknowledged, and they're going to join. I'll tell you about those in a second, but they're going to join the current American and National Leagues, the precursor to the American League, which was called the American Association. Essentially the same thing. A league from 1884 called the Union Association. That one is very strongly disputed, by the way. There was only one really good club in that league. Everybody else was scrubs. So we can come back to that. Hold on to this point for a second because we can come back to them. Also, the 1890 Players League and the ill-fated, but very important, this could be its own episode, the Federal League that ran from 1914 to 1915. They all received Major League designation in the 1968 Almanac of Baseball, which Major League Baseball put together to acknowledge the history of the game from the beginning to the end. The leagues that are going to gain Major League status are interesting and woven together, and we'll tell you about them briefly right here because again, they could, in some instances, merit their own episodes, and we want to get to the fun stuff here in a second. But the first Negro National League from 1920 to 1931 is going to be given Major League status. That league lasted and only fell apart because of the Great Depression. We've talked about some clubs and things falling apart in that era. The Eastern Colored League, which was its main competitor, they staged a Negro World Series from 1924 to 1928. The American Negro League, which began in 1929 with the surviving teams from the Eastern Colored League. They didn't survive after one season, and so we have a gap a little bit where there was only one league. The 1932 East-West League, which again was from scraps of the Negro National League after it fell. The Negro Southern League, shout out to the South, that's us.
Hey.
They existed as a major league only in 1932, so we'll see what Major League Baseball does about that, if they count all of the stats for the league's existence or just the 1932 season. Again, they took on the teams that survived from the East-West League and from the Negro National League, the first version of it, in 1932. And then the second Negro National League was formed and existed from 1933 to 1948, which is the cutoff for the baseball ruling. So 1920 was the first Negro National League. That's when they're starting this. 1948 is when the second Negro National League failed. That's when they're ending it. There also was a Negro American League that ran from 1937 to 1960. Their stats will count from 37 to 48. Again, they played a World Series against the Negro National League in those years. After about 1950, that league existed only as a shell. The teams basically barnstormed. It was a name you gave to the games, but it didn't really have any meaning or structure or anything else. It was just a title, kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters situation. So those are the leagues that are going to be involved, with 1948 as the cutoff, because after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, a lot of players left the Negro Leagues to go play Major League Baseball, and so that's where they're deciding it was no longer a major league situation. Kind of cool.
Yes. And yeah, and 1920 to 1948 may sound a little random. They decided that, like you said, definitely for 1948, that was the last year of the Negro National League and the segregated World Series. So they decided to cut it off there. They figured that was a good ending point for, quote, major league status. They started counting in 1920 and not earlier because leagues prior to 1920 weren't very stable and they didn't have a really solid league structure. So they've calculated, I guess, the best of the best, if you can think of it that way. Anything before 1920 may not be seen as good enough to have counted. Anything after 1948 may not be seen as good enough to have counted. So these are kind of the glory days, if you will.
Yeah, that's important, the way you made that sound, because it is about the structure and kind of there were games played regularly. Because even some of these leagues that were white leagues that were given major league distinction from the 1800s, and so those leagues, all their years and all the leagues that existed don't get major league status because frequently teams would stop playing once they were eliminated from championship contention. They would fold mid-season. They would only play like 2 games and be done. They would go barnstorming in the middle of the year. Like, that's the difference between a major league and just some teams that had good ball players on it. So,
yep. So, next question that I had after hearing about what was going on and the rulings and everything was, based on our Josh Gibson episode, we learned that the average Negro League season was much shorter than the average Major League Baseball season at the time. Negro League seasons, interleague seasons, I would say, when they only played other Negro League teams, lasted probably between 50 and 70, 50 and 80 games a season. The rest of the year, they barnstormed and they participated in exhibition games. And part of our Josh Gibson episode, we talked about how many home runs he had hit. And he's such a legend for how good of a hitter he was. And I started thinking, well, are they automatically going to adopt everything he did? The answer is no, as of right now. It's important to acknowledge at this point that statistics from barnstorming and exhibition games will not be counted. John Thorne, the Major League Baseball historian, was quoted in one of the articles we found as saying this, quote, "Peculiarities of their schedule were the outcome of prejudice. When we view the white major leagues from 1920 to 1948, it's a binary construct, the American League and the National League. That doesn't work. A better model for understanding the Negro Leagues would be to look at it like a college football model, where you had conference champions, the Big 12, the Pac-10, the SEC, the ACC, and so on, and then you had independents like Notre Dame and Army and Navy who played against those conferences and then also had cupcakes on the schedule," end quote. So basically what he's trying to say is that the MLB is adopting Negro League team versus Negro League team play and their statistics and the games and everything that happened in them, and not the ones where the Negro League teams were playing inferior competition or were playing in exhibition style games. The ruling actually took place December 16th. Presumably, integration will begin immediately, but I'm not sure that anything has been said about that. specifically when everything is going to start becoming adopted. But the rate stats are another interesting question. The batting average and the slugging percentage and stuff. We're not quite sure what they're going to do with that, right?
Yeah. So if you're not like a baseball stats nerd, or just somebody that's familiar with statistics in the first place, you've got statistics that are totals, right? Your number of hits, your number of home runs. Pitchers can win games. They strike people out. They give up hits. They give runs. But then to make sense of those statistics, we have rate statistics. So we have batting average. That depends. It's your number of hits, but it depends on the number of at-bats that you got those hits in. You might have your pitcher's ERA is a rate statistic because it's the number of runs he gives up depending on the number of innings he's thrown. So those kinds of statistics are very dependent on the number of at-bats, the number of appearances, the number of batters faced, the number of innings that a pitcher throws. And so inside of Major League Baseball season, there are rules for when you qualify. If you miss 2/3 of the season, so you only play 50 games, you may only get about 150 at-bats. You hit 500 in those 150 at-bats. You are not what is the word I'm looking for? You're not the batting champion because you didn't qualify with the number of at-bats you had. On your baseball card, it'll say you hit 500 that year. And on your baseball reference page, it'll say you hit 500 that year. But if you go look at the official stats for that season, you will not be listed. The problem with now integrating the Negro League stats in those categories is that under those rules, the players from the Negro Leagues qualify for batting titles, ERA titles, whatever it is. But they played significantly fewer games, significantly fewer at-bats and innings pitched. So it comes up with an issue. Josh Gibson, that we talked about famously, he's simultaneously become, without any other thought about it, the single-season batting average record holder and the most recent holder of a 400 average season, even though the men he beat played more games, 120 games for the batting title, 140 games for Ted Williams in what we used to consider the last 400 seasons. So the question becomes, what do we do about the rate stats? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. They're both right. Every answer is right.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can, like, so in Major League Baseball, the reason that they give you that line is to make sure that you play enough of the Major League Baseball season to compare with people that you were playing with at the time, right? So like you said, if somebody had 150 at bats versus however many you have in an entire season, 600, I don't know. If you had
600,
so if you had 600 at bats in a season and you can hit 300, but one guy just happens to go on a run in the first third of the season and hits 400, not quite the same accomplishment, right? So I would find it terrible, honestly, if they held that against the Negro League players. Either you take their exhibition games and you take their barnstorming, because that makes up the total number of games, right? In those cases, they played about the same number of games. The Negro League teams had to do those things to play year-round baseball. Unlike the Major Leagues, who were playing against each other the entire season, the Negro League teams had to use that barnstorm and that exhibition game mentality or practice to fill the whole season. So you either, if you're Major League Baseball and you're compiling the stats, you either take the barnstorm and exhibition games that they played and you count everything that they did in those, or you don't hold against the Negro League players the fact that they didn't play a 140 game season. I don't think you can't do both.
Yeah, it's really an interesting question because I'll say this, it's only an interesting question because baseball likes to pride itself, and I think incorrectly, on being this sport where you can always compare this player to that player just using the numbers because it generates so many numbers, and it is the sport that has true outcomes and you can get all these stats. But it isn't true. And we're seeing this right here. So Hugh Duffy is the leader of the batting average, single season batting average leader. He only played 125 games in the season that he got that record. Ted Williams played in over 140. Now we've got guys that are playing 162, probably in the 150 neighborhood. So we have a difference in how many games played. That's already a change from one era to the next. Usually we see this when you have more games to do something, right? Roger Maris, we're going to put an asterisk beside 61 because he had extra games. We didn't do the same thing with Sosa and McGuire, but they had steroids, so we throw an asterisk on them too. Usually we see it that way, not usually going backwards, but it's hard to say that they don't qualify because they fulfilled all the requirements of the league. So it may be a situation where you acknowledge, or maybe you don't even acknowledge it. Nobody goes into the baseball almanac and sees that a guy hit 440 and says, oh my goodness, he was so much better than every player that ever existed. He's got to be it. You realize that the 1800s were a different era. So it's okay for that number to be so out of whack with what you see. I think you should probably leave those stats in. I think that's an important thing to do, and just everybody acknowledge that it was 70 games or 80 games instead of 140.
Yeah, again, I think it would be a crime if you held that against the Negro League players because it was completely out of their control, right? They would have played 180-game seasons in 1930 if they were allowed to, right? They tried to play 180-game seasons or whatever I just said. They tried to play a ton of games, and they filled in the gaps. I don't know. You can't do both. Anyway.
I will make, you were saying something about barnstorming. I will make the argument. I don't know that I buy it, just for everybody listening.
Let's just make
but
it.
But here's the argument for including barnstorming. When I was giving you the list of leagues that had major league status to this point, one I said was a disputed one. It's the Union Association that existed in 1884. That league had 8 teams, and it played a full league season, satisfying those requirements. They also had major league level talent. The problem is the owner of the league, the commissioner, the man that ran the league, owned one of the teams. And it just so happened that all of the major league caliber talent was on one team. That whole league has been given major league status, but every game that team played was against inferior competition. So if we're saying that playing the best of the best and having the best of the best is one of the requirements, that league either should not be major league status, or you got to start saying maybe some of these games count. Now major league teams barnstorm too, and that's going to open up a giant can of worms. So obviously the answer is probably no, but there is, if anybody wanted to make an argument for counting barnstorming, there is one. We already kind of do officially.
Yeah, I as an advocate of Negro League baseball at this point, because of how much we've read and talked about it and stuff up to this point, I think I see both sides, but I would buy your argument wholeheartedly. Just because I want to see them. I want to see them get the recognition that they've never had, right? So I don't think you can hold that against them. Anyway, moving on. So what, right? I mean, this is a big deal. This is the recognition that they wanted, assumedly. This is the recognition that they wanted when they were playing baseball so long ago. And in a previous episode, we talked about the injustice that has been including Negro League baseball players into the Hall of Fame. Don't know what's going to come of that yet, but it's still a big deal. All of these statistics are going to be added to the Major League record books. Now, are there going to be any major shakeups in any of the all-time lists?
No. Depending on how far down the all-time lists you want to look. By and large, no. And it's a product of the amount of games they played, right? So Josh Gibson officially is going to get 238 home runs. That doesn't put him super high up on the list. Satchel Paige is going to end up with 115 wins. And that puts them among players you may recognize the names of, but that doesn't put them in the top 10 for wins or strikeouts or home runs. The rate statistics is really where you're going to find those things. But we do get some cool things out of this. We really do. Willie Mays is not going to move up on the hit list, but he is going to make Albert Pujols, who is directly behind him on the hit list, a little bit more difficult to pass because Willie Mays is going to get 7 hits added to his hit total from when he was playing in the Negro Leagues, or he may get 17 hits added to his total. There were 10 hits in the playoffs, so it depends on if they're going to count playoff games or not. Traditionally, that's not in your regular statistics, but it would be a way to get more games in for those players, so that's cool. But I am disappointed. I'm really disappointed in one. I just want to share this with you. Are you ready to be disappointed with me?
I'm fully prepared for this. Let's go.
All right. We all know that Hank Aaron has 755 home runs, and that Barry Bonds infamously has 762 home runs. If I told you that Hank Aaron in the Negro Leagues hit enough home runs to pass Barry Bonds, would you be excited? Yes. We all would be excited.
That, yes.
That would be really great. Unfortunately, all of those home runs occurred after 1948. And so Aaron hit enough to pass Bonds back, but they will not count. And that's a little bit disappointing. So if you're looking for Hammer and Hank to add to his totals, that's not going to happen for us, unfortunately.
That is sad.
I'm a little bummed. I'm pushing for him to move that mark to 1952. So they listened once. Maybe they'll listen again. We'll get a new home run champion. What else is interesting from these stats? Willie Mays has 660 home runs. That's going to stand pat. He did not hit a home run while he played in the Negro Leagues, except a game story says he did, but it has not been found to exist in a box score. These stats come from a website called the Seamheads Negro League Database. They are hardcore historians that look for these box scores to match up statistics. Because of the 7 leagues I told you about earlier, only that East Coast League, Eastern Colored League, was the only one that really kept up to date and good statistics. So that's a little difficult. But yeah, no big shakeups on the overall lists like some people may be expecting just because of the number of games played.
Yeah, and that goes back to the criminal act of potentially leaving out all the games that they played. But I get it. I understand that, like, the exhibition games, they could have played against anybody. So Josh Gibson's hitting a home run off of some poor little soul who's throwing like 30-mile-per-hour fastballs. Like, that's not the same thing, and that's right. Okay. But so all of those are cool little things, and the so what is nice. But thinking about this, right? Again, Josh Gibson is the primary example here for us because we did so much research and talking about him previously. Part of me is concerned that these Negro League players, some of them, maybe like some of the bigger, better known ones, right? Some of them are going to potentially have their legacy tarnished a bit, right? Because on Josh Gibson's Hall of Fame bust, it says, quote, almost 800 home runs, or between 800 and 1,000. I mean, it says some outrageous number that if all of those home runs were taken into account, he would be the all-time home run leader. Well, what happens when they only find 238? Like, he was known to be this all-time great hitter. And of course, like the rate statistics where his batting average is through the roof and stuff, that will show. But the the home runs are a little bit of a letdown, right? So are some of these players, like Satchel Paige only is going to end up with 115 wins. By the way, he had 112 complete games, which is
incredible,
unheard of in today's
also
game.
a product of the time, though. But yeah.
It's unheard of today for someone to pitch that many complete games with that many wins. But I mean, what do you think about that idea that Josh Gibson is potentially not going to be seen as the all-time greatest hitter, or that Satchel Paige is not going to be considered an all-time great pitcher?
Yeah, I think that is going to be determined by the perspective with which you look at it, because if you're looking at it in terms of the all-time home run list, then maybe the prestige takes a hit, because we're going to officially say this is the number that he has. No more mystique, no more unknown. Like, we're not going to make a giant thing about it. Then yeah, that does do it. But if, like, you're looking at it to tell the full story of the player, you're looking for the history of the player, then having them included as major league players and their numbers being included helps tell that story completely, because it is the rate statistics where this is going to come out, because just, you were talking about Satchel Paige, he's going to end up with 1,524 strikeouts in 1,536 innings. So that's almost a strikeout per inning, and it's right at 8.9 strikeouts per nine, which would be the stat we use today for rate stats. So that is unreal. To be right at 9 per 9.
It's amazing
for a starter. So I don't know, right? I think in terms of what it does going forward, I don't know. It does signify acceptance. These leagues existed. They're major leagues. We value the contribution to the game, right? I think that's the biggest impact. But what it does going forward, I think the historian for Major League Baseball made a good point when asked about why it took so long, is that, or why they weren't included in 1968. He made the point that that wasn't something that was considered a problem, right? They didn't even think of the notion of whether they should have included the Negro Leagues as a major league or not. And he went on to point out that the people that were doing that are the same ones that would have been voting in the Hall of Fame. Until there was an outcry to put Negro League players in the Hall of Fame, nobody thought about it. I think his actual quote was to say it to the people in charge, it felt like a solution without a problem. They didn't realize it was a problem. So going forward, the conversation that comes up about this will shape how those players are remembered. And how, like, what happens? Do we include more Negro League players in the Hall of Fame? I think the answer is probably yes still, because the pitcher with the most wins in Negro League history was Willie Foster with over 150. He didn't make the Hall of Fame until 1996. So, there are plenty of players down the list that, now that these are major league stats and we can compare them, they gotta be included. So I just think it's an important step. It helps hold the legacy up. I think there's more they could do with actually honoring the Negro Leagues other than playing a game every year in Kansas City and throwing $1 million to the museum that's in Kansas City to honor the Negro Leagues. I think there's more they could do, but I think this is a big deal in that regard.
It's definitely a huge deal. And something that I just thought of while you were saying that they needed to do more things to honor the Negro Leagues is how would you feel about a major league team wearing a Negro League replica jersey during games or something, like with names on the back or whatever?
Yeah. I don't know why that couldn't be a thing. Just anything possible to recognize that era and those teams, because we're saying they're major league now. It's just one of those things where it's a difficult subject. And so, whatever you do with it is going to make someone uncomfortable. If you know what I'm saying, like, because there are people upset over the ruling that, and I get it. They're feeling like that that these players are now being absorbed into Major League Baseball, and so the stories are going to be silenced to the point you were making a second ago, and it's just another way of covering it up. And if you look back at integration for baseball, that's similar, right? There's no reason that they did not just buy a couple of Negro League teams and have them exist inside the current framework, but they didn't. They just signed players. They raided the league, which has merit and it has historical backing, but so does bringing in franchises from your competition and then, moving players about. So it's, there's no right way to do anything in this situation because it is about doing what's right, but it's also about like upholding the legacy, and you got to do something that toes the line on both sides.
I think upholding the legacy is really important because we don't need to forget that they were Negro League teams, and we don't need to forget about the way that they were treated, and we don't need to forget about all of these important things that happened during that time and the reasons behind all of it. And hopefully this isn't MLB's way of like, oh, enough noise is being made about racism and about inclusion or the lack thereof in this case. Hopefully there's so much noise going on in today's world about that. Let's try and cover it up, or hopefully they truly believe that these people belong. I would hate for this to have turned out to be some like stage show, which it is being accused of being already by some media members. I won't say names. And hopefully it's more of a I'm sorry than a you're welcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I have another nerdy question, if you want that.
I love nerds. The candy and the people.
Yes. So I'm going to nerd out about this. So we've made these leagues official. So my question is not for the players now, for the actual teams. There's not been any clear information on how this is going to be counted. So those teams played in those leagues. A team won a championship in those leagues every year. Are we including those? I'm not saying we would include those as world championships, although many years had a World Series. So, but do we at least include them? Like, we know how many American League pennants different teams have, how many National League pennants teams have. Are we going to say now that the league championships are going to count in that list as well? Are we going to be like the Homestead Grays have won however many championships in their time? Because I think that's interesting. I mean, it's a nerdy thing. It doesn't really matter, but it's cool.
I really hope so. So, and because of how short they're taking these statistics, they're only taking 28 years worth. You're not going to see somebody take over the Yankees or the Cardinals for like most pennants all time, like that's not going to happen because there's just not enough of them. But like Josh Gibson's main club, the Homestead Grays that he played for so many times, they won
11.
They won a few
11 championships.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's significant. Like that should be on the book somewhere, and also be, if you can't tell me that the players playing on that team were major league players and then also tell me that the team wasn't a major league team. You just can't do that. I don't think there's any way they keep them out.
Yes, I think that's right. I think if we have a list of National League champions and American League champions, then there should be a list of Negro National League and Negro American League and Eastern Colored League. Like, we should include those. And if we've got a list of just league championships, then we should. And I don't see, if we're including them as major leagues and they played simultaneously with the regular major leagues, if we're going to write down that the Yankees won, I am failing myself as a Yankees fan right now by not knowing the exact number between 1920 and 1948. But if however many championships they won between that time, we should be able to say that the Homestead Grays won 3 World Series then. I mean, it's a World Series. It is the best against the best that they were eligible to play. I think that would be cool to just start listing the Homestead Grays as 3-time world champions, because it's true, even though it's technically a separate competition. I don't know. This is all cool to me. This is just really weird and nerdy from the statistics side of it, and I love it.
We've got 11 World Series titles for the Yankees between 1920 and 1948. So in 28 years, they have 11.
Yeah, and I'm gonna forgive myself by just saying that it's hard to remember what year when you have 27. It's hard to know when each one happened. I mean, it's basically like name a year. You got 25% chance of it being right. So everything's fine.
It's like a multiple choice question at that point.
It's hard being good. It's hard being good.
No, I ain't saying. I'm just saying. They had in 23, 27, 28, 32, 36, 37, 38, 39, 41, 43, 47 in that time frame.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are World Series that came while there was many of those years while another World Series was happening. That's all I'm saying. So, I think it's worth doing, but there's no clear answer, and I could not find, for full disclosure, couldn't find if all those other leagues, if the Indianapolis Hoosiers of the Federal League, if they're counted as having championships officially or not. So there's your homework, all you listeners out there. Go find out.
Yeah, go tell us. Thank you. So as with what we were just speaking about, there is still some unknown. We briefly spoke about the rate stats, how batting average, slugging percentage would be taken into account. Interestingly enough, Josh Gibson, Judd Wilson, Oscar Charleston, and Turkey Stearns all had at least 3,000 career plate appearances and batting averages that would rank among the top 10 all time, according to the Seamheads database. Their inclusion on that list would push Ted Williams and Babe Ruth out of the top 10. How do you feel about that?
And see, that's where I think the rate statistics for a career, I think that's where you get acceptance. I think that's right. I mean, I think that's incredible that we're going to push, Ted Williams and Babe Ruth along with two other people who I don't even know who the other two that would be getting knocked off the list are, but we're putting 4 new people in the top 10.
So the top 10 includes Ty Cobb, Rogers Hornsby, Shoeless Joe Jackson, Lefty O'Doul, Ed Delahanty, Tris Speaker, Billy Hamilton, Ted Williams, Dan Brothers, and Babe Ruth. So from Hamilton, Williams,
Billy,
Brothers, and Ruth would be out.
So Hamilton and Brothers are the other two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just is what it is. Those guys, 3,000 plate appearances. You're still gonna have some people take issue with it because 3,000 plate appearances is 5 years by today's marks. So that's 5 full years. By that point, you have a good idea of what a player is. 3,000 at bats, 500 games for fielding statistics, 500 innings for pitching statistics, and then 200 stolen base attempts for catchers trying to throw people out, 80 stolen base attempts for trying to steal a base, or 100 decisions to be on the wins list. So most of these players that played significant time in the Negro Leagues are going to qualify career-wise rate statistics. So I think if 3,000 was already the limit, throw them on in the list. That's cool. Babe Ruth and Ted Williams, you're gone. Sorry. Because I don't know. This is going to be an incredible statistical thing.
Stay tuned, folks.
And I know there are people out there that are like, oh, these baseball people and their stupid stats. But it's cool. They're not 1-to-1, year to year, era to era, but it is cool that we have them in this way. So
yeah, baseball statistics are incredibly confusing on some level, and then just fascinating at other levels, like you said earlier, where you kind of can compare era to era. I think you can compare baseball era to era better than you can compare football or basketball era to era. But again, a lot of that is left to be seen. What about so how many seasons would a Negro League player have to have played on average for their ability to reach that 3,000 mark, right? Because they're only doing 50, 60, 70 games a season. Let's just say 3 at-bats per game minimum.
Yeah. So 600 is usually the threshold in today's game. That's 162. So we're talking about half, maybe a little bit less than half. So We'd be talking somewhere close to 10 seasons, 300 at bats a year,
10 to 12
seasons to get to that 3,000 number. So that's a good length of time.
That's still that's still a long time.
And it's actually more impressive. I get that it's less games and less total at bats, but now you're talking about the minimum being something that takes place over a full career. So at the beginning, when you maybe struggle a little bit, toward the end of your career, when your skills have waned, yes, you're playing less games in those twilight years, but it's the same number of games you've been playing your whole career. So it works out the same. It's actually a little bit more impressive with a lower number at bats to be that high in a career stat. So I think
I like it.
That's pretty cool.
Fun fact, Satchel Paige didn't pitch in Major League Baseball until he was 41 and still made 2 All-Star rosters.
Yes.
Pretty sick.
He is a wonderful character. He was asked why he never settled down, like what kept him moving. And he said, I don't know. I've never looked behind me because I might see what's chasing me or something like that. So he was just always was moving, always pitching. Like he's somebody we may do an episode on in the future.
I like it. Yeah. Great, incredible career, but seems to be an interesting person as well. So last thing, I think, future Hall of Fame inductions. We talked about, we all know by now, hopefully you all know by now, that Major League Baseball has been very reluctant to introduce Negro League players into the Hall of Fame. There's probably only 40, I don't remember the exact numbers, about 40 or so, in Negro League affiliates, of players, coaches, managers, and owners who are in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And we know that they were inducted 1 or 2 at a time for about a decade. They took about a 20-year break. They inducted a few more, and then they took another break, and then another special committee inducted like 17 or some odd number all at one time. And nothing's been done since 2006. No Negro League Baseball player has been inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame since 2006. That was the last time. What happens now?
Yeah, I think this paves the way clearly for there to be more. I would hope it paves the way clearly for there to be more. There are more that could be included for different reasons. Players, managers, contributors, all could be included. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Buck O'Neil is in the Hall of Fame. He has an award named after him that honors, similar people, but he did a lot to preserve the game and to promote the Negro Leagues and to keep it in the forefront and in the public eye, and his actions did a lot to get us to the point of December 16th and that ruling. So for him not to be in is terrible. I mean, there are stronger words you could use there, but it is terrible that Buck O'Neil's not in the Hall of Fame, at least as a contributor. So hopefully this paves the way for that, because he's the most glaring example in my mind. But there absolutely are some players that should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Dick Redding, John Beckwith, those kind of guys.
So quick biography on Buck O'Neil. He actually passed away in 2006. He was a first baseman and a manager in the Negro American League, mostly with the Kansas City Monarchs. He worked as a scout and then became the first African-American coach in Major League Baseball. So he did a lot. His entire life was baseball. And it does not appear that he has been inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I don't know. He's received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's received the Beacon of Life Award. He's received a Lifetime Achievement Award. He's received all these things for what he's done, and baseball has not honored him with a bust in the Hall of Fame. And that's unreal. And
it's weird.
And all of the statistics haven't been compiled. Like these special committees, think about the time and how exclusive the Hall of Fame was when they first started talking about inducting Negro League players in 1968. Those people, just imagine the society in 1968, those people made the rules and all this stuff for who gets in and how often they get in and all of this stuff. I hope more players get their due, because and hopefully this ruling and this major league status bumps that a little bit. They definitely deserve this. They definitely deserve the recognition. And again, hopefully this is Major League Baseball's way of saying I'm sorry and not tossing out a "you're welcome" to the crowd and hope it's accepted,
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see though. Yeah, developing story. Things are going to change, and it's going to be hopefully fun to watch. Hopefully not frustrating. Hopefully all fun to watch and see what comes from this. I think definitely a good step for sure, though.
Yep, that's how I see it. I see it as a step in the right direction at a minimum, and hopefully a course altering decision as well going forward. Yep. So that's what we think about the most recent ruling. Again, as of this recording, the ruling was just a few days ago. We will hopefully hear something soon about some more of the decisions that are being made, who's going to be included, how they're going to be included. If we need to talk about it again here so you guys can hear it, we would love to do that. We're going to talk about it anyway, I bet. So why not record it, right? So we'll stay abreast of all of these things. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, let us know, and we will continue to follow this for you. Until then, thanks for listening.
Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Widcast Podcast.